have been in the Psalter of late, and we are this morning tackling Psalm 49, a psalm that doesn't quite fit any pattern, a psalm that is very, very deep, and a psalm that I personally find extremely intriguing on many levels. I've mentioned to you that the book of Psalms is divided into 5 books. You're probably tired of hearing me explain this to you, but each one of the Psalms falls into a category, and as we open up book 2 this morning in Psalm 49, we realize as we look at book 2 that nearly every psalm, every psalm, has a common theme in book 2. The Psalms of book 2 talk specifically about God, His kingdom, His city, His rule, His reign, His triumph over His enemies. There is a constant, continual theme in book 2, and common words that you read are Jerusalem or Zion, God's holy hill, His temple, His king. He is the king, His kingdom, talks about triumph over His enemies. Psalm 48 is a classic text of book 2. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion, this is Jerusalem. In the far north, the city of the great king. It is a triumphal psalm about Jerusalem, about Mount Zion. That is a typical psalm in book 2. I pointed out to you that psalms often follow a pattern of Hebrew poetry that sort of take a central thought. And if you haven't been with us, then this diagram and my discussion probably will perhaps mean nothing to you, and I'll try to explain very quickly. But the way that Hebrew poetry works is the central idea is in the center of the psalm. And if you can find the middle of the psalm, and sometimes that means you literally count lines, which doesn't always work in English, but often does, you find the middle of the psalm, you realize that's his point. And if you look at both ends, the beginning and the end, you realize there's a connection between the first thought and the last thought. As we looked in Psalm 26, the structure of this is called inclusio. The word escaped me last week. It's a bookend ideas, a bookend psalm that takes the same idea on either end and balances those thoughts to the middle. So we look at that's often the pattern of how Hebrew poetry works. We drew it out even this way last week as a wheel, that the central hub idea of Psalm 26 was integrity, and that every thought points back to that thought. It is not random, it is not haphazard, it's very cleverly, intriguingly written, and Psalms slow us down. They make us analyze and think. And one of the things that I find most helpful when you look at a psalm is before you start to really read it, although you do have to read it to begin this, is to try and find the pattern. Work out what is happening. What is the central idea? What is the structure of this psalm? It isn't always clear. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, and sometimes you come across a psalm like Psalm 49 that breaks everything I've told you about the Psalms. And it makes you feel like we've been saying, that the Psalms just feel like they're in a random order and they don't even have any sequential reason for them. In the middle of book 2, that talks about God's kingdom, His rule, His reign, Jerusalem, Mount Zion, we come to Psalm 49, which never once mentions anything at all about Jerusalem. In fact, this is so not, pardon my bad grammar, this is so not Jewish that the very opening line of this is, "Hear this, all peoples." This psalm is to every nation. Why is this psalm in book 2? And on top of that, it defies all sense of Hebrew structure in regards to finding the middle. The closest thing we find in this psalm is that verse 12 and verse 20 are almost identical. Now, if they were identical, that would be so helpful. But they're not identical, they're almost identical, and it does give us some measure of a clue of what is going on if you want to find the structure of this psalm. I find it helpful. Perhaps this is the part of the message this morning where your eyes get glassy. I'll wake you up when we get into the psalm itself. Point being, you can see as you read the psalm, knowing now that verse 12 and verse 20 are almost the same. They're there for a reason. And you notice that 12, it's in the middle of the psalm, not at the beginning. That would be so helpful. So we find at the beginning, the psalm could be structured this way. Verses 1 to 4 is clearly an introductory comments. It takes him 4 verses, so many lines, to announce what he wants to say. And this is a call to wisdom. Then you'll notice that there are 2 distinct paragraphs that come after the opening structure. And they end, the first paragraph ends at verse 12, and the second paragraph ends at verse 20, and these verses are almost the same, but they're not. Man in his pomp will not remain, he is like the beasts that perish. Man is in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. So we find there's 2 main thoughts that end with the same principle. So we know, based on this would seem a logical way to break down this psalm. We find verses 5 to 12 is talking about a specific discussion regards to wisdom. It concludes with verse 12. The second section begins with another kind of wisdom, the wisdom of God, I've labeled this, and it concludes with the same verse as verse 12. Something else I want you to see in this verse that is lost to us in our English translations, and I would never have found this except that it was pointed out to me by somebody much smarter than myself within my studies and reading this week. Verse 12 and verse 20, they are different, and yet there's actually a link to them. Interestingly enough, the one reads, man in his pomp will not remain, and man in his pomp yet without understanding. In Hebrew, these 2 words, remain and understanding, actually are very close to each other. In fact, they rhyme. And that would seem to be part of the device that the psalmist is using to connect this psalm together. Man in his pomp will not yalin, remain, and man in his pomp yet without yabin, understanding, is like the beast. And so we have this connection between these 2 sections, and we know a Hebrew reader would realize, oh, he's playing with words. So here's psalms that have nothing to do with rhyming, have a perfect triangle structure, that within a book have a connection to the whole book, and now we reach Psalm 49, which breaks every rule that we've ever explained about the Psalms, has poetry, literal poetry, rhyming poetry, no structure that follows the sequence, and is stuck in a book that has nothing to do with itself. What is going on? I don't have the answer, except I can tell you this. Part of the charm of the book of Psalms is to keep us on our toes. Just when you think you know what's going on, you have no clue. And suddenly you're snapped back into realizing, wait a second, and it makes you stop and think. This is what Hebrew poetry is meant to do. Make you analyze, make you consider, take your mind deeper, make you look at structure, make you think about these things. It is not haphazard, fancy words that mean nothing. There is a depth to this book, to the Psalms, that we in English often and in our 21st century minds that aren't used to slowing down, we skim over and read very quickly. Now, having said all that, this is time to nudge your neighbor and wake him up, because now we're going to read and work through Psalm 49. What is this psalm about? This one that does not fit any pattern. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all the inhabitants of the world. I've already mentioned to you in the middle of a psalm that talks all about the Jewish people and all about their city of Jerusalem and all about their king on the throne and all about his triumph over his enemies. This psalm now calls everybody across the earth, every single ear across the planet needs to hear. That's the idea of the way the psalmist begins. I have something to say that is for everybody. He even goes on to explain both high and low, rich and poor. This is not just the high, just the low. This is a poetic way to say everybody in between. It doesn't matter your status in life. It doesn't matter where you are. What I have to say is universal. It is a truth that everybody needs to hear, and I proclaim it to everybody across the world. That's the way this psalm begins. My mouth shall speak wisdom. I'm going to tell you something that everybody needs to know, is what he said. I'm going to tell you something that everybody needs to understand. The meditation of my heart, what I've been thinking about, shall bring enlightenment. If you will listen to this, you will understand something that is a universalism for everybody. I will incline my ear to a proverb. Well, what's the proverb, boys and girls? You know the proverb. Now, you know what a proverb is, a pithy little statement. The proverb is verse 12 and verse 20. I will incline my ear to a proverb. Man in his pomp will not remain, but he is like the beasts that perish. I'm going to tell you a proverb. Now we know the point that punches us in the face of this psalm is found in verse 12 and verse 20. This proverb, it's repeated with a variation, is the point of the psalm. And you very quickly realize that for all that is being said, it's really rather a simple psalm. Man, in his pomp, is going to die. He's just like an animal that dies. The end. That's the point of the psalm. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. And we know that this psalm is a song. It begins to the choir master. It's not that I've put in the text, but it's in the psalm itself. So we know that this is music that was put to music, and these are the lyrics. God wrote these lyrics through David. I'll solve my riddle. He's got a question, and right off the bat, we realize that this is what he's talking about, this riddle. Why should I fear in times of trouble? Now we're beginning. He's made his call, his declaration, his introduction. This is for everybody. Listen to what I got to say. It's a universalism. I've got a proverb for you. Let me explain. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches? That's his riddle. Why should I worry when I look at the world around me and it appears to me that people succeed who are wealthy, that people who have some means and some wealth of some nature, that it seems like they're triumphing without God in their lives? It seems like they are doing a really good job of enjoying their lives and living. Why is that you look around you and you wonder, is it worth my time and effort to try and serve and commit myself to God? Nobody else is doing this, and they seem to be getting on just fine. What's with that? Why should I fear? He begins to ask himself this question. Why should I begin to wonder if I am wasting my time? We know that his thoughts are about the wicked around him and about the deceitfulness of riches. So he says, he carries on. Truly, this is such an obvious statement, it's hard to know what to say, how to flesh this out. It's so obvious. Truly, no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. 3 verses, 1 sentence. No man can ransom somebody else. You look around you and you ask the question, they're doing well and they've got all this wealth, but at the end of it all, what does wealth really do for you? Does it actually meet the deepest need that you have? Does it actually solve your ultimate problem? No. Regardless of how wealthy you are, you end up in the same result as everybody else on planet Earth. Your wealth cannot buy eternal life for somebody else. It cannot ransom another person. You can't give money to God to ransom your life and give yourself something of importance. There is nothing that wealth ultimately does to provide you with real, genuine answers in life. That's the illusion of wealth. Truly, no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly, can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. What is the pit? The grave. This is talking entirely in human terms. You almost realize that the psalmist is talking from man's wisdom, remember in this section, if you remove God from the picture, what in the world difference does it make how much you have? And you go on like you're somebody special just because you've got some wealth and means and because you've built yourself up. He goes on to say, for he sees that the wise man die. So how many rich men have gone to funerals and realize that even the smart people, they die? And it never seems, what the psalmist is saying, it never seems to light a light bulb in their head that makes them realize, oh, my wealth, it makes me feel so important and it gives me such notoriety and importance in this life and status. It actually doesn't mean anything because it's never going to keep me from that. And the ultimate wisdom never seems to dawn on them. For he sees that the wise die, the foolish and the stupid alike must perish. I'm not sure why. I like that the word stupid is a biblical word. You know, it somehow gives some justification in my own heart sometimes when I think these things about people. It's just stupid in a biblical way. It's a great word. Even the fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others, if that isn't the explanation of how life works. Just on its own. Just the mechanics of life. What you have, you leave, and it means nothing. Their graves are their homes forever. Now that is a solemn thought. Wow. How long will you live in comparison to how long you will be dead? I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you it is most likely going to be a lot longer. That is a crazy idea. You will be dead far longer than you will ever be alive. If that doesn't snap you to attention. Their graves are their homes forever. What good is wealth at the end of it all if it doesn't buy you the solution to your deepest problem? Now I got to pause here and make sure you understand. This psalm is not saying that wealth is wrong, that money is evil, that if you are rich, you are bad. That's not what this is about. There is nothing wrong with wealth in itself. This is saying that wealth of itself does not produce what it gives the illusion to produce. It does not provide what it looks like it provides. It does not actually answer the biggest question that gives the illusion to the person who has it that they've got everything they need. There is a lie that happens within wealth itself that causes people to think of their own self-importance and forget the basic truth. They have a problem that money cannot answer, regardless of their position. That's all that's being said. You could be the wealthiest person here today. This still applies to you. It doesn't condemn you. It just says pay attention. Their graves are their homes forever. Their dwelling places to all generations. Though they call lands by their own names. How wealthy is that? When I was in grade 3, living in the city of Toronto, we had a project that came to all the schools in the area to raise money for the newly built Toronto Zoo. If you're old enough and you grew up in the area, maybe you remember this fund drive, and we raised money for everything we could think of and brought in our nickels and quarters and thought we were doing a great thing by contributing our $30 or whatever our class raised, I don't remember, for this project. We bought an animal. I know, I'm pretty special. Because of me, I know, it's pretty cool. There's an animal in the Toronto Zoo that I paid about $4 worth of the travel expenses and finding this animal and whatever happened. It was a bird. Doesn't matter what bird. I've never found that bird, and I've gone through the whole zoo multiple times looking for my stupid bird, and I can't find it. But here's my point. They promised us a plaque. They promised us that our school would get a name, our name engraved for all eternity on a stone that would be in the pavement or on a plaque that would be somewhere in the zoo, and we would be held up as Chester Public School, as the great school that helped the Toronto Zoo. I have yet to see that name on any plaque. I have gone there, I have scoured all the schools and all the people, I've read all the books, I can't find a stupid animal anywhere. And I worked hard for that animal. And I brought in my stupid nickels and quarters, and I got nothing. And I still think I'm important because I put an animal in the Toronto Zoo. It takes so little to make somebody feel self-important. How important do you think you are when you have an entire country, when you have land that's named after you? Oh, yeah, let's go to Stevensville Road. Who are these people that they think they get roads named after them? Well, la-ti-da. Did you know that there's a river up north just on the way to Huntsville? I forget the last name of it. It's a last name, a family name in this area. Well, who are those people? Do you know that my wife has names? She's from a family that has names in New Hampshire and Epsom, New Hampshire, in the area that are named after her family? Oh, and I married into that family? Oh. You don't even know how important I am. We do this. We congratulate ourselves. We somehow feel that this imbibes the importance of who we are. And the reality is, you are equal to everybody else because we all have we're all in the same exact position. Man, here's our proverb, in his pomp, in all that he has, in all of his glory, he will not remain. It doesn't matter who you are. This is a universal truth. He is like the beasts that perish. Have you ever scooped a goldfish out of the bowl and flipped it into the other bowl and watched it spin down and disappear? How about that for your life? You are like the beasts that perish, flush, gone. That's what he's saying. You are here today, gone tomorrow. Just like the beast. Now don't be confused by the language. This is not saying that you don't have an eternal quality to you. This is just talking on human terms. This is the same kind of theme that you find in the poetic book of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 3. I said in my heart, with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. On one level, it's exactly the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. What's the one place? All are from the dust, and to dust all return. And who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward or the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth. You can't tell, humanly speaking, if there's anything beyond the grave. Humanly speaking, we look exactly like an animal that dies. Humanly speaking, if God is removed from the equation, we have no advantage. In fact, if you remember Macbeth, he says these words, I think, after the queen dies, scene 5, act 5. And of course, you need to say this with a rich British accent, which I don't have. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow. Oh, I should do this right. Life is but a walking shadow. Poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Brilliant. That's poetry. What is he saying? Ultimately, we live, we breathe, we die, and it signifies nothing. That is exactly the problem that we are born in. Now, I know you can't see a picture of the universe up here, but I have a picture of the universe for you to see. The reason is because, you may not know this, but everything that we are told is that the universe is going to die a heat death. It seems to be the logical conclusion from what I understand from, and this is beyond my field, but just from what I've read and what I've been told, that according to the second law of thermodynamics, which means that everything runs down, if you take a set of batteries out of your flashlight, you'll find that there's less power today than there was yesterday because everything moves to a state of equilibrium, a state of entropy. So it's just natural. Everything runs down. You have to constantly wind the clock. You have to constantly put gas into your car. Everything moves from energy to no energy. Our universe will one day die. This is a known thought. Here's the problem with that thought. The moment the universe dies, it won't be tomorrow, it may not be next week, it may not be a billion years from now. And don't hear me wrong, I'm not saying this is how I think things will end. Christ is going to interject his person into this world and change all of this. But outside of God, this is the end of the universe. It will die a heat death. And that, by definition, renders everything we have ever done on this earth as meaningless, pointless, and empty. I don't know if you realize this and if I can get your head to go around this. But you will say, oh no, but I was kind to somebody. But why were you kind to them? One day, everything will eventually disappear. Everything, that the universe will be strewn with the carcasses of dead planets. It will be in utter darkness. There will be no memory, no nothing. Nothing will be anything, mean anything. It will be gone. But I found the cure for cancer. So what? The universe is going to die a heat death, and even if you've caused people to live a little bit longer, at the end of all things, you find that they come to the same point of zero. It is pointless, it is empty, there is no reason for it, there is no gain in it, there is nothing that we can gather within this universe that makes any meaning in the universe, because the universe objectively has no meaning. It is going to die. Now, this is talking outside of the realm of the supernatural. And this is one of the reasons that this makes Jesus so wonderful, that he said he is the bread of life, that he can actually provide the sustenance in a universe that has no sustenance, that he is the light of the world, that he can actually provide light in a universe that has no light and has no destiny. He can show you the way to God. This is why Jesus is so important. But outside of that, all that you are left with, your life is rendered as pointless. I don't know if I can hammer this enough without banging you on the head to the point that you lose your own sanity. But everything we do has no point. And so you find people sitting on a stage at a talk show, all thrilled and excited because their new movie's coming out, and everybody else is so excited that their new movie's coming out. Oh, we love you because you're so funny and because you blah, 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 blah. But nobody stops and says to them, but did you know that the universe is going to die a heat death? So your movie has no point, and all your wealth has no point, and all your popularity actually means nothing, that at the end of it all, we're all in the same position, and what you've done actually accounts to the very same thing that I do if I do nothing, and in fact, you're as nothing as me, but let's applaud you because you're popular. We never seem to be able to leap beyond find the truth that we're actually living lives on a hamster wheel that go nowhere and do nothing, and we celebrate this of each other. We rejoice with each other, and so we come up with these pithy, stupid little statements. I have to try this. Please work. Why? I don't know who Joseph Campbell is, but he said this: life has no meaning. Each of us has meaning, and we bring it to life. I have a migraine now, because that makes no sense at all. Life has no meaning. Each of us has meaning. This is the kind of stupidity that people drink up like water and think that this is intelligent wisdom for them. And this is the delusion that man lives under. In his pomp, he has come to believe that he has some substance, that he can actually produce meaning, that he can actually do something that's of value, that I can actually do something that for the betterment of the world, because look at me, I'm fabulous. Surprise! You are born into a world that has no intrinsic meaning objectively. You cannot now insert your own meaning into an objectively meaningless universe. Life has no meaning. Each of us has meaning, and we bring it to life. It is a waste to be asking the question, when you are the answer. What? What a bunch of rubbish. And this is touted as the wisdom of the world. Do you want to find meaning in a meaningless universe? then go and make your meaning. Here's another one. The meaning of life is to give life meaning. Now, who do you think you are to be able to produce meaning when there is no meaning? But this is the foolishness of wealth and pomp, that people are deluded enough to think that they actually can produce this thing. It's called, by the way, if you want to know, it's called existentialism. It's the line of thinking that has captivated our culture to the nth degree, that has caused people to believe that they actually have the ability to produce meaning in a meaningless universe. Albert Camus, he was a French philosopher. He said ultimately, when he thought about all of these things and the meaningless of the universe, and realized himself that everything we do, no matter what you do, remains meaningless. The literal meaning, he said this, the literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that the literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself. Cool. Because that's Camus' endgame. He thought the only thing that makes sense in a meaningless universe, the only meaning we could bring, is if you kill yourself. That was the author of Absurdism, which I don't need to tell you is absurd. I don't know if you know what I mean when I've been saying to you that the universe is objectively meaningless. Let me try to say it this way to you so you grasp this, because I think this is such an important truth, and I'm going to hammer you even though you don't want to hear me. Objective meaning means it's a truth that has nothing to do with your opinion. It's outside of you. It is an objective truth that the Eiffel Tower is in Paris, France. I've never been there, but I understand it. What I've just said is objectively true. Now, you can believe that the Eiffel Tower is in Beijing and get on a plane and fly to Beijing to see the Eiffel Tower. But I can promise you that doesn't work, no matter how much you believe that to be true, because your belief is not based in objective truth. Objective truth is a truth that is outside of you, that you cannot affect, that you can have an opinion about something contrary to it. You can have the opinion that that the moon is a cube, but the objective truth is the moon is a sphere, regardless of what you believe. The objective truth is, because the universe will die a heat death, the objective truth is everything we do in life is meaningless. You now don't get to try and work up your own meaning and bring it to the table and think somehow because you're wealthy, because you've done something, because you help people, because you're good, because you give to the poor, because you help the hospital, because it's been named after you, because you bought a wing at the library and it's got your plaque on it, because somehow you've done something, that you have somehow inserted meaning into your life. You didn't. You can't insert meaning into an objectively meaningless universe. But this is the illusion and the delusion of pomp, of man in his wealth, man in his success, that has the Grammy with his name on it, that has the Oscar with the best picture, and I'm the best director in the whole world, and I've reached the top of the world. Well, guess what? You've reached nowhere, because you are doing it in a meaningless universe. So everything you do ultimately is rendered pointless. Believing that you can exercise your own ability to bring meaning into life is a lie, a self-delusional lie that the pomp of this world causes us to believe and hold on to. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. It doesn't matter who you are. You get erased, and everything you've done is erased. Pointless, empty, vain, meaningless, guaranteed. Second section, let me just tell you this quick. You've listened to me long enough already. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them people approve of their boasts. Oh yeah, that's exactly it. This is the path, what I've just described, is of those who have the foolish confidence that I'm important. I mean, look at me, look what I've done, look where I am. I'm important, and the people after them applaud them. Oh, I hope to be just like you. Like sheep, we are told. What a fantastic expression. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Sheol is the Old Testament expression of the afterlife, the place of the dead. Sheol is a generic word that we would say he passed away or he's gone to the next life or something of just a generic phrase. It's neither heaven nor hell, it's just Sheol, death. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. It's a good expression. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol with no place to dwell. They're gone, the next generation comes, and nobody cares. Verse 15, if you don't have a Bible, you need to open this and look at verse 15. Verse 15 changes everything. And if there was to be a center of this text, which there isn't, this verse 15 is not the center, but this is the hinge. And if there was a hinge, it's off the center. Verse 15, but God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Selah. I don't know if you know what Selah means. It's if you're actually sure what Selah means. It's used 71 times in Psalms, 3 times in the book of Habakkuk, 74 times altogether in the Bible. It is transliterated from the Hebrew, which is Selah, because we don't even know what the word is, so we don't translate it into English because we're not sure why that word is there. It seems to be in Psalms that are musical, so people think that it means that you're supposed to pause at this point and think about what has been said to you, because this is a serious thought. Some people think it's the music that's to pause, that the music stops, like there's a silence in the music, and then it starts again. Some people think that it's a musical interlude where the lyrics stop and the music keeps playing, you know, on your electric harp or whatever you're doing. Clearly it's a banjo. Or they think that maybe it's the music builds to a crescendo. We don't know. My point is I just want to explain that word to you so you understand what is going on with that reference to it in the text. But God will ransom my soul. If something outside of me doesn't come and do something for me, if something outside of me doesn't come and rescue me, doesn't provide for me, then I have no hope. This, as I've already declared, is why Jesus is so important. This is why Jesus is the central figure of all that we believe and the central figure of all of human history. Because he declared that he was the one who came providing the only means of bringing meaning. That he was the truth and the life. If you want to live, you can't even live until you are in him. He is the source of everything that we're missing. And if you don't die in him, then you die, your life is meaningless, empty, void. I don't care what you've done, who you think you've helped, it means nothing. But when you die in him, you die with absolute purpose and meaning, because now you have been brought in to the God who has meaning for you. And now your life takes on a whole reason for being, because now you have been swallowed up in the God who created you for his purposes. They may be to suffer, they may be for wealth, they may be for success in some measure of field, they may be to travel the world as a missionary, they may be to work and slug it out as a mother or a parent or whatever you're doing. He has got a plan for you, and you are living that out, and your life has meaning now because you are in Christ. If God is not the center of your life, you have nothing to live for. And suicide actually makes sense, if I can say that politely. I'm not trying to encourage anybody to do anything foolish. Do not think that's what I mean. But the ultimate logical end of a meaningless universe, I mean, what's the point? Be not afraid when man becomes rich, he adds, when the glory of his house increases, for when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed, while he lives, he thinks he's something special, and then there's a little parenthetical thought. And though you get praise when you do well, you think you're special and everybody else around you thinks you're special. Surprisingly enough, all of that feeling of specialness, that existential, I'm just creating my own meaning, is meaningless. And at the end of it all, you have created nothing. His soul will go to the generation of his fathers who will never see light. Never again see light. He goes to the same place. In verse 20, been very patient with me. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. Now the difference between verse 20 and verse 12 is the artistic variation saying, yet without understanding. Man in his pomp will not remain. Verse 12. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding. What's the difference? Without understanding this simple truth. Man in his pomp, without understanding the emptiness and the vanity of his life. He dies like a beast. Without understanding that you don't insert meaning into your life just because you think you're special. He'll die like a beast. Without understanding that you need Christ to give you life, and he is the only source of life, you'll die like a beast. Man, without understanding that without Christ you have nothing and will always have nothing, regardless of what people make you feel like you've got, regardless of how you tell yourself you're important. Man without that understanding dies like a beast. Nothing. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity without Christ. This is Psalm 49.